Welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Edge. I'm your host, Peter Jennings. I go by CSRM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And as always, joined by Adam Levitan and Al Zeidenfeld. Adam, give us the news and notes on the podcast. We have your favorite holiday coming up next week, and we're in the midst of the grind.
Yeah, actually, I spoke to my favorite Chinese restaurant. They're getting my shrimp lo mein all cooked up for next Thursday, so they'll be ready for me to stop by and enjoy the 3-game slate. News and notes on the podcast. Listener League is up, of course. By now, I hope you know how to get in. Go to DK Playbook, find the logo, find the link, and plans for next week we were just discussing. We will talk on Wednesday morning, not only about the main slate, we will also talk about the 3-game Thanksgiving slate, and we'll turn that around as fast as possible.
Al, save the podcast. I mean,
I can't. You getting that shrimp
it's not hard.
imported
Just
from
berate
Chile?
Adam.
You getting that shrimp imported from Chile?
No. You know what's funny? Al had a background that said ESPN on it. I was like, Al, you better take that background down. ESPN does not want to be affiliated with these takes.
Yeah, that's true. Jerry's looking extra cute today, though.
Yeah. Jerry's very high strung these days.
Really?
Yeah.
Too many Amazon packages, right?
It's that, and also she kind of nibbles at the kids, and then so in order to get her to stop because they hate it, I give her food or treats, and now it's like we've trained her to attack the kids so that she gets the treats. It's a bad situation.
You've caused a Pavlovian response where your dog has to bite your kids to get food.
Right. She knows that if she goes at them hard enough, she's going to get food just to calm her down, So it's a really bad situation.
Yeah, that's bad training right there.
Yeah, really bad.
Let's reinforce the worst behavior. Were they riding her around the house like a horse or something, or just?
Yeah. In happier times, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
All right, well, let's dive into the games. That was a great intro for us. Adam, as usual, is on brand with his Thanksgiving topics, and we learned a lot about Jerry, the most beautiful beast in the world.
Yeah.
All right, we got the Broncos going into Buffalo. Buffalo favored by 4, 38.5-point total. Adam, I listened to your most recent ETR pod, and I can't tell you how happy I was to just hear you gushing about Courtland Sutton, who had been berated on this podcast before, but now rightfully is being deemed a baller, as you said. What are the news and notes on this game? John Brown coming off a huge game, Josh Allen coming off a huge game, but we have a low total, and there are some interesting spots here for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I think last week these two teams were in spots. Denver playing Minnesota's just atrocious secondary, and Buffalo playing Miami's tankathon, where they were in really, really good soft spots against offenses who could force them into some shootout potential. This week, obviously the ceiling is capped with these two pretty good defenses, I think, playing each other. From a news and notes perspective, well, let's start with Tim Patrick, because Tim Patrick is stone minimum and just immediately came off of IR and played ahead of Deshaun Hamilton, which surprised me a little bit, but Tim Patrick has some real size, speed, skills, and in this game I do expect Courtland Sutton to be shadowed by Tre'Davious White. However, Tim Patrick missed practice on Wednesday with a shoulder injury. We'll see what happens with that. Other injury news, Jeff Hireman is back to a limited practice. Maybe he comes back. And I mean, Noah Fant's usage has been awesome since really all year, but especially since Manny Sanders was traded away. So Noah Fant is extremely athletic, being used in an awesome way. It's just the way Buffalo plays defense, they want you to run. So we saw the role change for Phillip Lindsay last week, playing ahead of Royce Freeman. I guess you could consider that, but maybe there's more plays here than the environment would suggest, but it definitely has the potential to be a really low-scoring game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what we expected from this one. There's not a lot of plays here for me. I do like Patrick if he plays, just because, as you said, he played a ton of snaps last week, mid-50 snaps out of the 70-something that the Broncos played. So, you can't score points if you're holding your helmet on the sideline. At least he's on the field. He did see a good amount of targets. He's a big guy, so he could get some red zone looks, and he's just on it. We are absolutely starved for value on this slate. So is Tim Patrick this amazing play and a lock button play, and oh god, I got to get more Tim Patrick in my life because he's this amazing football player and a fantastic fantasy prospect? No, that's not what we're saying. He's just a guy that's really, really cheap this week and getting a lot of run with some end zone skills. And there is no, I guess, good matchup against the Buffalo Bills, but at least he's not going to draw Tre'Davious White.
Yeah, you drafted him. We did a
Yep.
little draft for charity yesterday, Al, and that was a strong pick. I was looking at him because we're so desperate for value. Of course, he doesn't practice Wednesday, either does Julio Jones, so I took as well. But we'll get into that more.
Julio
I think
never practices on Wednesdays, though.
Yeah, Adam tweeted about that. We're not worried yet, but foot injury with his history, we'll talk more about it. I think Noah Fant, like Adam referenced, is always going to be a play in tournaments, given how athletic he is. We don't have many tight ends that just have game-breaking speed, and we saw that pay off already once this season. And you're right, his usage has really gone up since Manny Sanders has been out. Cortland Sutton is a baller, but this is not the week to play him. I think Philip Lindsay's interesting, and I know you talked about Devin Singletary and how you feel like you were wrong on him so far, Adam. And yeah, it's been frustrating, and I do think there's a lot of signal in what you said, given that Josh Allen and Frank Gore are going to steal a lot of the red zone work. But if there's ever a week to go back to him, I don't mind it here at home. The Bills defense can play really well. You have a new quarterback for the Broncos still, who's been pretty impressive, but still could be mistake prone. So I don't hate Bills defense and Singletary, but pretty thin across the board. I mean, any reason to go to John Brown, who I expect Chris Harris to be on him quite a bit? I mean, seems points chasey and just not a great spot.
No, I mean, I play John Brown every week. I mean, so yeah, I think it's fine. It's obviously a really bad spot for John Brown, but I mean, dude runs deep down the field. Josh Allen throws it deep down the field. It's just such a perfect combo.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it moving because this game is just marginal. We'll go to another game that doesn't look great on paper, but some plays. We have the Giants going into Chicago to play the Bears. Bears are 6.5-point favorites, which is interesting to say the least. And 40.5 total. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to start between Mitchell Trubisky, who has allegedly a hip pointer, or maybe is getting benched. I don't know which. I do think Chase Daniel probably gives them a better chance to win right now, which, isn't saying much. I don't think Chase Daniel is a huge improvement, but Chase Daniel probably has a little bit more confidence right now. So we'll see on that. I expect Sterling Shepard back for this game, which in theory would give Daniel Jones a full complement of weapons. But now we have Evan Ingram not expected to play. And we also have Rhett Ellison, who's allegedly racing me this offseason. We have Rhett Ellison also not expected to play in this game. So they're down to I don't even know, this dude, I believe his name is Caden Graham.
Caden Smith.
Caden Smith.
Jaden Graham is on the Falcons.
Exactly. Thank you, Al. Yeah, Caden Smith wasn't even...
Scott Simonson.
Yeah, so I haven't looked at that too much. I just kind of came across it this morning that both Ingram and Rhett Ellison are going to sit. But yeah, I don't think there's a ton to get excited about here just because, Chicago's offense has been embarrassing, but I think their defense continues to play reasonably well. And I'm always want to be high on Danny Dimes, and that's paid off a few times this year. I mean, he's been over 30 DK points 3 separate times this year. I'm not sure this is the spot to particularly be high on Danny Dimes.
I hate this slate. Can I go on record saying that I just hate this slate? Every single receiver
you just did.
Thank you. Good. I appreciate you allowing me to do that because there's no damn value anywhere. And other than in this game as well, you got Anthony Whack-a-Mole Miller, who every once in a while is hey, look, 11 targets. And then he goes back to 1, 2, or 3 targets for the next few weeks. And then week 7, 9 targets. And then whatever, 3 or 1 or whatever. He's 3,500, but I don't know if I can warrant playing him, even in a matchup against the Giants, or more than maybe a tournament sprinkle. Somebody like Darius Slayton is interesting because of all the injuries everywhere on this pass-catching core, including the tight end. So, more volume should be spread to some of the other wide receivers like Golden Tate or Slayton. But Slayton's even up at 5,300 following his big game. So, yeah. I'm suffering.
Well, not only is Slayton back, or not only is Slayton 5,300, but Sterling's likely to play.
Yeah, I'm just that's what I'm saying. But with the tight ends, they utilize their tight ends so much in this offense that I mean, maybe we're going to have to do a lot of research on Simonson and Caden Smith, basically. It's are these guys going to be actual parts that are used in this offense, even to the point where Rhett Ellison was used the last few weeks with 3 to 5 targets a game? Are they going to get that sort of usage? It's just plug and play, next man up? Because none of them are going to get Evan Ingram usage. So that usage kind of goes to theoretically Barkley, who hasn't seen the pass game work that he saw last year, or it goes to the wide receivers. Even with 3 wide receivers, there's enough volume there with Danny Jones to throw it to 3 different guys.
Sterling Shepard you just brought up, I think he could be a really good tournament play, assuming he's good to go. I've always liked him coming out of Oklahoma. I just think he's a really, really strong player, explosive. And a concussion obviously is scary. He's had a lot of them, which is why he's been out for so long. But assuming he's good to go, I expect him to be healthy. And this time of the season, it's nice to have someone with fresh legs. So he's probably my favorite play, assuming he's good to go for tournaments, just because no one's thinking about him since he hasn't played in a while. So maybe you get him low owned. But yeah, agree overall, this is not a great game. Think we can safely move on unless you have something else, Adam?
No, sir.
All right. Let's go to the Steelers at Bengals, which this game has a lot of news and shockingly is setting up to be there's some plays here, I think, actually. You're not looking at a huge total. It's obviously a divisional game, but Adam, the news could impact this. It's a 38.5 total, which is terrible. Pittsburgh is favored by 6.5. We're recording here on Thursday morning. What are the news notes?
Yeah, I mean, God, there was a time when I didn't think Deontay Johnson was going to play that I thought the Steelers might have the worst skill position group going out there on Sunday on the entire slate. Does look like Deontay Johnson is going to be able to play despite his concussion last week, which would make their 3-wide set Deontay Johnson, James Washington, and Johnny Holton, because Juju Smith-Schuster is not going to play. At running back, I'm not expecting to see James Conner. The good news for the Steelers is Benny Snell is expected back, so I think we'll see kind of an even split between Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell. And then on the other side of the ball, Auden Tate, I'm not expecting to play. And meanwhile, Tyler Boyd is like bitching his face off about not getting enough targets. Obviously, an extremely difficult matchup for the Bengals offensive line against the Steelers' elite defensive line as they try to protect noodle-armed Ryan Finley. Certainly that's a concern. The way that Mason Rudolph has played this year is a major concern. But, I mean, God, the matchup for Mason Rudolph couldn't be much better. It's just an interesting game overall, and one that guys are going to be cheap because there's a lot of injuries and there's like clusters of injuries. So it's certainly interesting, and I think worth looking at despite the low total.
Offensive line continuity is a pretty big thing, right, Adam?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so when you lose an all-pro level center, it's also a pretty big thing to an offensive line, right?
Yeah, he's good too.
Yeah, very good. So you got Mason Rudolph and his dented head, who can't seem to throw the ball to players on his own team even before getting struck in the top of the noggin with a helmet, now squaring off without his center, the big toe of the offensive line, if you will. And you mentioned how good that Steelers defensive front is. They're 4K against Cincinnati. The Bengals defense at home is only 2,100. Which one do you think is the better defensive play?
This is coming from the guys who passed on Cardinals D at 1,500 last week.
You know what? This is a forward-thinking podcast. I had the Saints D. Like, you can actually fault me for having the Saints D last week.
Yeah, I think it was wrong.
What did I have versus you, numbnuts? I had Cardinals, right?
I don't know.
I had Cardinals. My team was dusty, though, as usual.
Always play the defense playing against Jameis. That's it. He's the flowchart defensive streamer.
Yeah.
He'll throw as many touchdowns to the other team as he will to his own.
It's funny. I roll the nuts around the industry and can't win in tournaments. And I roll the nuts in cash around the industry, can't win tournaments. And DK, I just dusted off in cash and win in tournaments. I don't know how that's possible. I've never won in tournaments and DraftKings in my life, and now it's trending hard. This game, I like a lot of plays. Vance McDonald, another guy you drafted, Smiz. Nice value, I think, in this spot. I mean, who are the else they're going to throw to?
Like it's weird though. He hasn't had more than like 40 something yards in any game this year. It's like he has not had more than 40 yards receiving in any game this year. So like, yeah, I think he's a good value, but like, is this going to be a ceiling one?
Remember the stiff arm last year?
Yeah, let's live through that vicariously.
Yeah. Bengals are bad. I like the Bengals defense though because they're cheap, and I think it's a good spot. And then Jalen Samuels, I think, is a really interesting option. Obviously, it's news dependent, but 7,200 is expensive, but he could catch a ton of balls in this spot too. So I think those are all viable plays, and you have the Boyd squeaky wheel narrative. I think the Steelers defense could play really well relative to this Bengals team, which is just a joke. But we're starved for value, and here we are looking at a divisional game and playing, guys that aren't great, but
I don't know
stand out as plays right now.
I don't know if the listeners have picked this up, but every time we mention a value play, we kind of like either vomit in our mouth or laugh under our breath at who we're talking about as value plays this week. It's like, I'm almost sorry for bringing up any value plays this week because they're all ugly. Every single one of the value plays has massive warts.
I would add that the shower narrative has started to lather up a bit lately.
Oh, God.
James Washington.
How late did you stay up working on that line?
Baby. It just came to me. This is comedy genius. It's been getting going lately, though, and now no Juju, and now Bengals defense. I'm just throwing it out there.
Right. Now we're talking. My mansion on Narrative Street, it did really well last night in basketball. I was calling for Bertan's revenge game. Baby. We're talking real estate's appreciating over on Narrative Street. So I'm all about the shower narrative here with Washington as well. All right, keeping it moving. We got the Dolphins at the Browns. This game actually could have a decent bit of fantasy goodness, a great spot for this Browns team, which is trending in the right direction. Obviously, the Garrett thing has been talked about a ton all across the media. But Browns favored by 10 here versus the Dolphins, 44.5 total. Is this the week Odell Beckham? What did you say, Al, in the past? Knees and elbows?
Yep.
Is that your
heels and elbows?
Saying? Yeah. Levitan's never played Beckham in his life. Is this the week that you get him in your lineup, bud?
It's been extremely profitable this year. Guy, printing money, not playing Beckham this year. From a news and notes perspective, David Njoku, actually, he was designated their player to return from IR. And I don't know if he's going to be back, but he might be. They're talking like they might be able to get him some work this week. I doubt he'd get a full workload, but we'll see. Also, from a defensive side, I normally don't talk too much about defensive news and notes, but God, Myles Garrett and Larry, I don't know how to say his last name, so I'm just going to say Big Larry, two of the best pass rushers in the NFL. So, it's a pretty big blow, I think, to the Browns defense. That said, they are playing the Dolphins. But yeah, this is the best matchup that Baker and Odell and they have all seen since week 2. The Browns have had a really, really tough schedule. And in that week 2 game against the Jets, Odell went heels and elbows, caught like a 70-yard touchdown or something against the Jets. I think that was Monday Night Football or something like that. So yeah, I expect Odell to be very popular at 7K. Think about it this way. He's 7K and Jarvis Landry is 6,300. You only need to find 700 to get from Jarvis Landry to Odell. The production this year has been very similar between them. I've played Jarvis Landry a ton. I've played him mostly at 4,800 and 5K. Now he's 6,300. So I think you're asking a little bit more from Jarvis Landry. Not that he can't have a good game. And then, just from a usage perspective, you can go back on my Twitter and find it. But the way that Cleveland's been using Kareem Hunt has been James White-esque, I would say. And Kareem Hunt has a really big role in their plan. They're a lot of teams talk about it and they don't follow through. The Browns are actually using 2 running backs in tandem pretty realistically. So I just thought that was worth noting because there are a lot of them that are going to be in play. They're playing Miami.
So Baker obviously in play. Both of the wide receivers obviously in play. I agree 100% about Kareem Hunt being a James White-ish sort of role right now for these Cleveland Browns. What do you think about Fitzmagic and Devontae Parker and then run it back with one or both of those Browns wide receivers as a ridiculous tournament play and just say, you know what, this game doesn't have the highest total in the world, but we do have a concentration of volume going to those guys. We know that Miami can't run the ball. They've traded away or cut their more talented backs. They're running a kid now. Goodness gracious. They have to throw the ball, and they have the guy that wants to challenge down the field, and Devontae Parker's got 34 targets the last 4 weeks. Very concentrated sort of work coming his direction, especially with the injuries that they've suffered at wide receiver. So I don't hate it. And as you said, he should be throwing from a little bit of a cleaner pocket this week, Adam, with Big Larry, as you said, missing this game as well as Miles. So I don't hate that kind of concentrated stack with Fitz to Parker and then bring it back with one or both of the Cleveland wideouts.
Guys, this is the old baby spot.
Oh, here we come.
I think this is an absolute home run smash game relative to the rest of the slate. There's other games that are obviously good, but when you start looking at who you can fit in, I think this is one of the best games to stack in general. I mean, I think this is when Beckham just goes absolutely bonkers. Kareem Hunt, really disappointed in taking him yesterday with you, Al. He's
You did take Kalen Ballage, though.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah. Guy's averaging about a yard per carry in a cloud of dust. Sure, I'll take that guy. He's terrible. I mean, he did get some opportunity in the passing game. I'm more excited about Parker. I think Gesicki is interesting. And I just love Kareem Hunt in the spot. And Baker Mayfield is quietly becoming a pretty viable option. And, you know, we've seen just guys go nuts versus this Dolphins team all year. I'm expecting a huge game from Baker. I like Jarvis Landry. I think Kareem Hunt is very helpful for their passing game. So I'm getting more and more excited about just this spot in general. And the Browns being beat up on defense should be good for the Dolphins. So, yeah, Fitzmagic, we've seen it before. He can make games competitive. And the reason I'm excited about this game relative to other ones is that you can actually afford the pieces, because a lot of game stacks that we want, which we'll talk about in the next couple of games, like, really tough to get the strong options in because they're so expensive. So I'm pretty high on this game. And yeah, Kareem Hunt is someone I'm actually looking at in cash. Is that really thin, do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's been so many running back touches to go around for the Browns the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure you can project that. And you know, when you're counting on, like, you know, he only gets 17% of the carries, you know, like I've debated this with people before about playing James White in cash. You know, you're using a running back spot. Maybe that's not as bad this week, but you're also relying on, like, you know, 5 catches or 50 yards. You know, I don't know. It's not something that I was really thinking about doing.
Okay, Adam, yeah, I do have a question for you along those lines. Would you rather play Kareem Hunt in cash or Patrick Laird?
Well, come on. I'm not playing either of those dust balls.
I really wanted a Patrick Laird take from Adam.
Yeah, I don't know much. I saw a bunch of, like, dynasty people talking about Patrick Laird. Dude played 14 snaps last week.
Caught 6 balls in those 14 snaps.
Yeah, well, that's going to be tough to sustain.
Yeah. Well, Kareem Hunt, sounds like I'm a little higher than you guys. I could see the Browns just dominating in this game, and he'll get more carries if they're up by a lot, I think. And the passing game usage is great, and he would never be in consideration most weeks. It's terrible. Yeah, this week is absolute garbage. Well, it's really tough.
That's one thing I would say about this slate as a whole, is that normally, like, the running back spots are, like, the most prized spots in my entire lineup, right? Like, I would rather die than, like, waste the running back spot. But this week you can make a case that that's not as much the case. So I guess that would be a case for Kareem Hunt. I'll certainly look at it more.
I think almost all the running backs are thin. Obviously, we have the guys at the top, but it's just so hard to fit them in with the lack of value. All right, moving on to the games that have the highest totals, but we have expensive players. We got the Buccaneers at the Falcons, and this is just a great spot. 51.5 total. Falcons favored by 4.5. The big story that everyone's talking about and just can't seem to there's reasons with the defensive coordinator change and all the blitzing and whatnot, but this Falcons defense, Adam, went from just total dust and getting smoked by everybody to playing great in 2 spots where we thought the other team would play really well. So what are the news and notes here, and what are you thinking about this game? There's still a really high total, obviously.
Yeah, well, let's start with the injuries. I mean, Al mentioned I normally, like, barely even look at the Wednesday injury report, especially with veterans. But, you know, there were reports that Julio was limping around. He's had foot issues before, and people spotted him during the game against the Panthers, like, flexing his foot and looking uncomfortable. So for what it's worth, I'm watching Julio's status more closely than usual this week. I would also note that the price on Calvin Ridley has come up to the point where he's only $1,500 less than Julio. I mean, they made Calvin Ridley $6,500 after his eruption game, and Julio they left at $8K. Obviously, the Bucs have the biggest funnel, maybe, like, that I can ever remember. I mean, they're so good against the run and so bad against the pass. Other injury news: Austin Hooper, I do not expect to play. Devontae Freeman, I do not expect back. And, you know, OJ Howard got benched last week after that, like, kind of behind the back interception thing. And then Cam Brate went out and caught 10 balls. Like, it wouldn't shock me. And I have I didn't I don't know anything about this. It wouldn't shock me if OJ Howard was just like flat benched. Like if they just didn't play OJ Howard at all in this game, which would certainly bring Cam Brate into play.
That would be a disaster.
You really need his 2 catches for 20 yards out there.
It's week 12,
I need something down the stretch here.
It's week 12, Adam. You got to think about it in those
Kelsey's
terms.
on bye. I got Kelsey. I'm all in on Kelsey, and I got Kelsey, Kittle, and Howard.
It's week 12. It's the final week.
Kittle is.
Got to punch your ticket to the dance. It's week 12.
I got some unbelievable teams. I have one team that's it's up by 60 points, and I need to hold on, but I got like the whole team on bye, and then I got guys like OJ Howard, George Kittle. I need something.
Yeah, on the defense thing, I was talking to Brandon, Brandon Thorne, if you guys don't know him, like spends all his time watching like pass rush and offensive line play, which sounds insane to me, but I love it, and he's really into it and really good at it. He doesn't think that that there's been a big change, and he has some reasons that he thinks why they've been more successful lately than they have before. So, I'm going to talk to him more about it. We'll see. I'm hesitant to believe that Atlanta has made a full turnaround, but it certainly gives me some pause when talking about the Tampa guys. That said, if you were to hand pick a better matchup that is more likely to be pass-centric, play fast, feature high play volume, this would be the one. So I would never say play all the dudes, because that's, Al's line. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I always know who the dudes necessarily are, but I would assume, Al, that this would be a dude spot, if you will.
Yeah. Devonta Freeman, though, news and notes.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play.
Okay, you don't think he's going to play. So, Brian Hill is once again on the radar in a scary fashion, just because of volume alone. So, everybody's going to want to play every different type of pass game stack that you can in this game, whether it's Mike Evans or Godwin or Julio and Ridley and all of the Panthers. All the Falcons have been priced up because of the matchup with Tampa Bay, something that we've seen week in, week out, that DraftKings has really priced everybody up for the matchup against them. And it's very condensed in terms of the targets that we see. And then the injuries are going to even condense that further. Russell Gage enters his second week as a viable value play, as his price really didn't come up that much to only $3,900. And as I've said before, on a week where we're really starved for value, he's actually on the radar for me as somebody that I'm looking for to try and find some salary relief if I want to pay up somewhere else. But this seems to be a week where, as you said, you don't want to burn a running back spot, Adam, but this seems to be a week where I think you're going to see people pay up once, if not twice, at wide receiver in cash and have it not be wrong because of the way that the slate breaks down.
Tricky slate.
Yep.
Lots of good options here. All expensive. I don't know how you're going to fit them all in, but yeah.
Kalen Ballage.
It's a great spot. Kalen Ballage, Scarborough, Brian Hill against the run defense that's dominant. And the guy who's tweeting about how he doesn't care about his fantasy owners. Yeah,
but that's great. Just because Davis Maddock triggered him.
Davis. My buddy Noah Riddell put out a great tweet. He said, I'm going to tell my kids this is Empire Maker, with a great picture of Davis. It's so good. I don't really have much to add to this game. I mean, it's a clear play all the dude spot. You just can't afford to play all the dudes, so I don't really know what to tell you. Calvin Ridley has been awesome. Obviously, last week needed Calvin Ridley to win tournaments. I think he's a really strong play again. Obviously, Julio, we'll see his status. I'm monitoring that as well. I wish Austin Hooper were playing, but he's not. And that'll be interesting down the stretch, too. Matt Ryan's expensive, but I think he's one of the top quarterback plays overall. I took him yesterday with you, Al, but we need the savings. I'd like to pay down at quarterback, but I really want to play Matt Ryan. So I'm just struggling a lot with making teams on DraftKings this week, and I want exposure to this game, but I've really struggled. Initially, my thought was Julio for sure, but now we have this injury. So, if Julio's out, what do we expect with Gage? Do you think that's going to help him in a big way?
I mean, Gage is a career special teamer. I don't think he can really do much more than he's doing. I think they just play Justin Hardy a lot. But yeah, on the other side, we didn't mention Godwin and Evans. I think what the surprising thing over the last couple of weeks has been how much they're throwing to guys not named Godwin and Evans. So like you see Scotty Miller pop up for targets, and you see Cam Brate get 14 targets, and like all these other things, and you're not seeing as much concentration with Godwin and Evans. So I would think the pendulum swings back to Godwin and Evans here, but it's just something to keep in mind, how you think Tampa Bay is going to play it. I mean, ideally when they're playing well, they're playing through Evans and Godwin.
The Falcons had 7 sacks through their first 8 games. They had 11 sacks last week. Now they've got the Buccaneers, and their price has gone from $1,500 to $2,600 to $3,500. You mentioned how you don't think that they're doing anything differently. They've just been lucky the last 2 weeks with 11 sacks. It's hard to be lucky with 11 sacks.
No.
So, like, if they're blitzing a lot more and putting a lot more pressure on, and you've got a quarterback who turns the ball over like it's his job to turn the ball over, how can we avoid paying up for the Falcons defense and try to overweight the field there?
Yeah.
Adam, that's directed at you. I can't answer that.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like some silly lottery strategy for the lottery guys. Yeah, no, I like I said, I'm no expert in offensive line, defensive line play. I defer to what Brandon writes on it. But
what did he write on it?
Well, it's not out yet, so I don't know. I wish I knew.
We are hitting the listeners with some hard hitting.
Well, this is like nobody knows the answer, right? Nobody knows the answer. What's going on with Falcons defense, right? You can speculate, but yeah, I mean, and also the coaching change that happened didn't just happen over the bye. Like they changed who's calling defensive plays before that, and they were still getting dusted. So the easy narrative to say, oh, they changed coaches, they changed play calling, and now all of a sudden they're playing well. It actually happened in week 6, and they were getting dusted for a while after that. So, I don't know. I wish I knew.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the Panthers at the Saints. Big total for the Saints here, team total. 9.5-point favorites. We have a 47 overall total. New Orleans, you want to jam these guys in, but they're also expensive. And, of course, Christian McCaffrey, doesn't seem to matter what the matchup is, still went over 30 fantasy points without a touchdown last week, Adam. Mm-hmm. What are the news and notes here, and how do we possibly fit these guys in, given the lack of value?
Yeah, I mean, pretty difficult spot for Carolina, I think. Kyle Allen has, I don't know if it's because teams have more tape on him or whatever, but he's clearly, sinking to the bottom of quarterbacks in the NFL. And, he actually moved the ball reasonably last week. He did throw some really bad interceptions, a couple of them in the end zone. So maybe it would have looked better if not for the interceptions. Definitely would have looked better if not for the interceptions. But, going to the Superdome to face this defensive line, I think, is a tall task. From an injury perspective, watching Marshawn Lattimore didn't play last week, and it didn't really matter. They still handled Evans and Godwin fine. But I think if Lattimore does play, he'll end up on DJ Moore, who's just been crushing. And I've been playing DJ Moore every week, and it's been pretty nice. And then good. From a matchup perspective, do expect James Bradbury to be on Michael Thomas, and James Bradbury has done a good job on Michael Thomas. Last year he held him, I think it was under 60 yards twice, which is pretty remarkable. Michael Thomas is playing on a completely different level than everybody else on the planet right now, and when Drew Brees drops back, he only throws to Thomas or Kamara anyway. So I'm not going to downgrade Michael Thomas a lot. Is just something to note. And obviously Michael Thomas is still very much in play, even at what is he, 9,300 or something like that.
Michael Thomas is essentially a running back right now. He is essentially as consistent as the highest volume running backs, and comes in at a price tag, $1,200 cheaper than Christian McCaffrey, with a similar raw projection, a similar medium projection to him. It's absurd how good Michael Thomas has been on volume, which is something that usually ebbs and flows at the wide receiver position. We see bad games from wide receivers. As you mentioned last year, Bradbury held him to 60 yards twice, or less than 60 yards twice. I think that if you are going to play that matchup and you're going to fade Michael Thomas, I think it takes some serious testicular fortitude to stick to that, because I don't see very many paths to failure for Michael Thomas. Failure being defined as 4 or 5 catches for 60 yards. I don't see many paths to that, even with the matchup. And the question is, Peter, am I wrong?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I love Michael Thomas this
Same?
week, just in general. I mean,
just as a human,
obviously, yeah. Guy's got Jordan cleats. Got freaking.
He does have the Jordan 11s, yeah.
Yeah, that's You got to bump him up a couple points in the projection based on that.
Yeah, the shoe.
I mean, his worst game.
.shu. Yeah.
Yeah. His worst game is 16.4 points. I mean, he's 9,300, but just in terms of how he scores on DraftKings, I mean, he's perfect. We don't have to dive too much into it, Al. You just made a good argument, and I think he's one of the priorities for spending up. The secondary options are interesting, and not even secondary, but Alvin Kamara, I really want to get to him. I think he's the running back we can have a lot of confidence in given his role on this team. They talked about kind of easing him in, and then he just got a bunch of opportunity. I think he had 14 touches or something like that in the first half, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
Something crazy in the first half. And, ended up with a pretty good game without a touchdown because he caught 10 balls. And I think that's how they're going to use him going forward is, he's going to get opportunity as a runner, but he should be seeing a ton of usage in the passing game like we've seen in the past. So I think he's a really strong play, but he's expensive. It's hard to fit him in. Christian McCaffrey is a tough one for me. At 10-5, you just want to jam him in, but I have a ton of respect for this front for New Orleans, and it seems like a pretty easy game plan. The downside with fading Christian McCaffrey, obviously he can break a long touchdown, but when they do get down, and what happened last week is, Allen's just a check down specialist, and he's going to throw it to Christian McCaffrey. And if Allen does get benched at some point, I actually think that'll hurt Christian McCaffrey. I don't know who's behind Kyle Allen.
I think it's Will Grier.
Yeah, Kyle Allen is a dream for Christian McCaffrey owners because he just checks down so much. So that's the concern. But 10-5 is a price tag we've wanted to play. We've basically been playing him every week, but this is a matchup that I think is tougher. And I guess the concern, if New Orleans does dominate, is that Christian McCaffrey still gets there in garbage time. Do we have any love for the receivers on Carolina? Because we've been playing them every single week, but now obviously a tougher matchup going into New Orleans.
I like Samuel personally. If I'm picking between, and I've been on DJ Moore every single week for the past 4 to 6 weeks, and the price has finally caught up to the volume and the production, and now he's got a really tough matchup, albeit in a high totaled game. Curtis Samuel has been really highly used inside the red zone, so as much or more touchdown upside for somebody like Curtis Samuel at 1,000 less.
Am I a fish to go back to Traquan Smith, who I thought was the best GPP play? I think you deemed him the gold 5-star play of the week, Adam. And he just completely busted with donut and one target. I mean, I was shocked. He was on the field. I need to look into that a little bit more, but he feels like maybe a flop lag situation. It's just hard to get encouraged when the guy gets one target.
Yeah, well, they don't throw to anybody else, it is what it is. But that's why I try not to talk about stupid tournament plays because, God, I think Traquan Smith, and even in hindsight, was a good play, right? But you're going to lose.
I thought he was a great play.
No, but even now, I still think he was because, you're going to lose, the overwhelming majority of time you play tournaments. So, if you're trying to get first, I still think Traquan Smith was the right play. But, yeah, you have to accept that in very rare occasions they throw to other people besides Kamara and Michael Thomas.
Yeah. Adam's not bitter about tournaments at all. He loves playing tournaments, and you can expect him to fire in 150 lineups in the Millionaire Maker this week. Moving on, we have a game that actually has some value and looks like just a good spot in general because of obviously it's a high total, but there's some plays that I'm really excited about here. We have Seattle going into Philly, 48 total. Philly's favored by 1.5. The downside here is the Eagles are still a little beat up. What are the news and notes, Adam?
Yeah, I think the downside is also the Eagles' defense has been playing really well. I retweeted a tweet from Field Yates. Since week 8, this is the team that leads the entire NFL in yards per play allowed. So, I think Ronald Darby and Jalen Mills have gotten a ton of crap and they haven't played well, but as a unit, they're playing better, and those guys are playing better also. From an injury perspective, Jordan Howard remains questionable. I don't think he's been cleared for contact yet as of Wednesday. With that shoulder issue. I do think Jay Ajayi, who was only active in case of emergency last week, if Jordan Howard's out this week, I do think that they'll get Jay Ajayi out there. Some still would be Miles Sanders as the feature back, and obviously we saw Boston Scott touch the ball a decent amount, but only played, I think, 12 snaps, and Miles Sanders' usage last week was ridiculous. You can go back to the solo pod for my take on Miles Sanders. Alshon Jeffrey, I'm not sure if he's going to play either. And, the Eagles, Nelson Aguilar is just so bad. And what they have at wide receiver, they're just such a slow team. Even in a good matchup, I don't have optimism about an an explosive game for the Eagles offense. Like, I'm just not sure it's in them. Like, they can't make explosive plays with the players that they have, unless they really feature Miles Sanders and et cetera, et cetera. Tyler Lockett, I do expect back. He got hurt and it was scary. They had the bye week and looks like he's going to be back. And Ed Dixon, Luke Wilson's not going to play for the Seahawks, but they'll likely put Ed Dixon into that role. And I think Jacob Hollister is still in play, but I mean, DraftKings got very aggressive with Jacob Hollister's price. He's what, like 4,300 or something like that?
Expensive.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's an interesting game. I think there's paths to it being far lower scoring than I guess the market does.
I mean, I think that Carson Wentz is fine. Despite what you said about how slow this offense is, he's priced as the 13th highest priced quarterback on the slate, but multiple projection systems have him in their top 5 in terms of expected scoring on raw projection or media projection. So there's some inherent value to him based on where he's priced this week. And when you consider at least how the matchup fits for him, Seattle has allowed quarterbacks to be extremely efficient with a rating of over 128 when throwing to tight ends. We know that Philly, with Djax out, throws a lot of 2 tight end sets out there and has a lot of talent at tight end, obviously, with Zach Ertz sitting at 6K and Goddard sub 4K this week. This could be a week where we see Ertz pay off. I think he is the best value play quarterback, the best sub 6K quarterback on the slate. And like I said, Seattle's just a good matchup for opposing quarterbacks, a reputation defense. They're allowing the 5th most passing yards per game this season. They've allowed hyper efficiency when throwing to tight ends, and Philadelphia likes to throw to their tight ends a lot. So even without a lot of speed on the outside to burn and with injuries to Alshon and stuff, I still think that this is a good spot for Carson Wentz. He's just underpriced versus expectation.
Yeah, he's underpriced, and the options that he's thrown to are underpriced. We'll see what happens with Alshon Jeffrey. He's not a bad play if he gets out there. Zach Ertz is expensive, but 11 targets back-to-back both the last 2 games. I expect him to get fed. Dallas Goedert, if you want to go that direction in tournaments, is 3,700. I think he's fine. Nelson Aguilar's been dusty, but hey, he's going to get volume, and there's not that many great plays that are cheap. On the other side, Josh Gordon, 4,200. Mm-hmm. Al, you were on him yesterday as well. That's a bet on talent, and he's had more time with his team, so maybe he gets more involved. Carson's somewhat cheap, but the Eagles defense, like Adam referenced, I have a lot of respect for them, so probably not as high on Carson. But yeah, Russell Wilson's a baller, and I mean, I do think that there's paths to a shootout here, but I do have a lot of respect for this Eagles defense. I think the value is more on the Eagles side. If you had to run it back, let's say you're doing an Eagles stack, Adam. Do you have a preference out of the Seattle guys?
Well, I'd be unlikely to do an Eagles stack, but if I was going to bring it back, probably, I don't know. How much is DK Metcalf?
63 hundo.
Yeah.
And Josh Gordon's 42.
Yeah.
Lockett 76.
Yeah. Yeah. I would probably still go.
This slate is awesome.
I would probably still go. My answer would be Metcalf, I think.
Really? It's 63, paying up. Wow.
He doesn't like this game. That's fair. All right, let's move to the Lions at Redskins. Another just fantastic spot here that we can get really excited about all the options. This is obviously not a very high total. Sitting at 42.5. Lions are favored by 3.5 points. Was excited to see Geis finally come back. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Adam, what are the additional news and notes?
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Matthew Stafford. It seems unlikely he's going to play this week, which gives us another week of Jeff Driscoll, who, I mean, you can see Jeff Driscoll is competent, man. I mean, he's mobile. He's not afraid to throw the ball down the field. So, yeah, I think, Jeff Driscoll and the Lions pass catchers are in play. Obviously, I don't know, man. People are excited about Bo Scarborough, and they were excited about J.D. McKissick, and they were excited about Ty Johnson. They were excited about Paul Perkins. People keep asking me about Lions running backs, and I'm just like, God, they weren't giving a full workload to Kerryon Johnson. You think they're all of a sudden going to unleash Bo Scarborough? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense to me. They still have Ty Johnson. They still have another guy. I forget. I think it's McKissick. I mean, God, they're going to play all 3 of them. So I get that it's the Redskins, but I'm not that excited about it. Paul Richardson and Chris Thompson are also both questionable, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, Dwayne Haskins, obviously, he made some like really impressive throws, and Terry McLaurin got a 67-yarder called back, still had another like crazy bomb. So, I think those guys are in play. I mean, the Lions defense is not good, but it's getting thin, I think, with both these teams. And I wish Stafford was playing. I'll say that.
If Peterson misses, I like Geis a lot more, but they said that Wednesday's miss was just a day off, even though he's got dealing with a toe injury. So, like, if he misses, I think Geis becomes a lot more attractive because Detroit's been so giving to opposing running backs. But, like, this game is really, really thin. But as you said, Driscoll's look good. So how can you not look good when you got Danny Amendola to throw to, Pete?
Dusty Danny.
Dusty Danny.
That's a good zinger. I see it. I like it. I drafted dusty ass Bo Scarborough yesterday and hated my life.
He might be fine. I mean, he might get like 12 carries.
That's what I projected him for, 13, 14 carries, and he should get the goal line work. So, he's not going to catch any passes. And the best thing you can say about him is, he's big.
Yeah, have you seen that picture of him from his freshman year at Alabama? He's huge.
He's huge. Guy's big. Man, it's just thin. I want to play, someone like Kenny Golladay maybe. Hawkinson ruined my dreams. I had a great tournament team, stacked that game, which I thought was one of my sharper tournament things of the year last week. A game that I was excited about. There's a lot of just spots that you could get excited about. This week, not so much. This is just literally the dustiest slate ever. We had 2 4 o'clock games too. It's just terrible. So I don't know. Galladay, I want to play McLaurin. I mean, I guess the one player I still respect in the Lions D is Darius Slay. So I don't know. I'm not too excited about anyone in this game other than McLaurin. I think Galladay's fine. And the running backs, it's thin. So I think we can safely move on unless you guys want to throw anyone else out there.
No, sir.
Not from this game.
Okay. All right. The last 1 o'clock game is the Raiders at the Jets. We're looking at a decent total here. I mean, it's not great, but 46.5 is pretty solid for these two teams. Raiders are favored by 3. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Herndon remains out, so we've seen Ryan Griffin's usage. I mean, Ryan Griffin is being used at elite levels. Unfortunately, he's been priced up also. He is 4,200 now, but Sam Darnold is throwing short, and Sam Darnold clearly likes to throw to Ryan Griffin, also likes to throw to Jamison Crowder, who's been awesome, but is priced up as well. And really the way you beat the Raiders should be through the air. Le'Veon Bell's usage was scaled back last week, and he's been banged up, and maybe that's why. He's still got like 20 touches, but for the first time, they really mixed in Bilal Powell a reasonable amount. So that scares me a little bit. On Le'Veon Bell, it's like the season is dead. We have this guy on a big contract. Why don't we start playing Bilal Powell and Ty Montgomery a little bit more? I don't know if that's what they're thinking, but maybe it is. And I don't really have any other injuries and stuff like that. I mean, the Jets are very good against the run and very bad against the pass. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to pass on Josh Jacobs this week. Doesn't mean that he can't have a very, very good game, but I'd be probably more interested in the Waller Gazelle type stuff.
Le'Veon Bell, 6,400, seems to be the cheapest high volume play with upside at running back on the slate. I know that there's differing takes on Le'Veon Bell coming into this week because some people think that he's a very good value and some people think that he's not such a good value. But he's been extremely consistent, at least with his volume, 20 plus touches in 7 games so far this year. And Oakland has a defense that has trended a little bit worse against running backs the last 4 weeks than they have showed for the previous 7. And you've got a New York Jets offense that's finally hitting its stride and starting to really be a little bit on the upswing. So guys like Le'Veon Bell, Crowder are interesting to me. Price up spots on Griffin. And obviously, if you want to attack the Jets, it's going to be with somebody like the Gazelle, who may prance against that, as Adam has said, very slow defensive secondary.
Yeah, I hope we see the prance. I want to read a tweet from Le'Veon Bell, and I'm curious what your reaction is to this and how you project him. Le'Veon Bell. I done had 5 random HGH blood tests in 10 weeks at NFL. I'm not doing another after today. Whatever y'all looking for, it obviously ain't there. I'm not about to keep allowing y'all to stick me with those dirty ass needles. Find the players who really do that find the players who really do that HGH BS and get off me. I mean, 5 random HGH blood tests, strong. But what do we think there, boys? I mean, I don't know why that does seem kind of weird because he doesn't seem like the Le'Veon Bell of old, honestly, this year. He's obviously. You have a theory?
Yeah. The Jets have serious buyer's remorse on Le'Veon Bell and are hoping and are sticking the NFL on him in the hopes that he fails so they can get out of paying him and cut him or something like that.
So you think they're like whispering to the NFL? They're like making like anonymous bomb threadish type phone calls, like just to the league office. Hi, this is an anonymous source, and I think that Le'Veon Bell's on HGH. You should test him.
Yeah, exactly.
And the league's like, hey, Le'Veon Bell, you got to pee.
Exactly.
Oh no, it's the dirty ass needles that he hates.
Dirty ass needles.
I can't blame him for his dirty ass needles.
Yeah. Oh man, I chuckled to myself when I saw that, and it is interesting to see his usage drop last week. And a lot of the, he's struggled this year with efficiency, but I think that's just a lot to do with the offense. Robbie Anderson, I think this is a spot where we can fire him up in tournaments. I mean, he can break a slate. We've seen that in the past. Still elite speed. Jamison Crowder, I think, is a really strong play, but he's expensive. Wish Herndon would have finally gotten healthy at some point this year. I was really excited about his talent coming into the year, but of course the guy can't stay healthy, and it's kind of a bummer. Were you looking at Josh Jacobs at all, who was chalk last week? I think he's not really being talked about, not rating well this week. What are you guys' thoughts on Jacobs?
Yeah, I mean, Jets defense has been awesome against the run. That doesn't mean that Josh Jacobs can't win. He's really, really good. I mean, I think he's PFF's number 1 graded running back.
He was coming into last week.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of strict rushing. So yeah, I would not fault anybody for playing Josh Jacobs. It's just not the best matchup, but who cares?
Counter argument and piggybacking on the not the best argument. The Jets defense is allowing 18.5 carries to opposing running backs. The last 4 weeks, they're allowing 45.75 yards per game to opposing running backs on those 18 carries. Saying that they are a tough matchup is understating it. They've been tremendous against the run the last month.
Yep. All right. Well, if this slate couldn't get any dustier, we have freaking 2 games like I mentioned.
I'm so mad we have to talk about this week's slate. Can we talk about literally anything else? Can we talk about how friend of the podcast, Drew Dinkmeyer, just tweeted about Kyrie Irving, and I'm way into that right now?
Yep. I responded to that.
I know. So did I.
Yeah. I'd rather talk about Kyrie than this slate.
Would the listeners object? This slate sucks.
Yeah. We have terrible games, no value. All the games are on 1 p.m., and then it's going to come to a screeching halt because they want us to watch Cowboys and Patriots, which, that's a good, exciting real-life game.
There's 2 afternoon games again. It's going to rain in Foxborough. It's going to be like a terrible game, too. It's going to be a weather game. This sucks.
Yeah. Well, at least Jerry looks beautiful in the background.
You know what, though, boys? The same amount of money is going to be awarded this week as there is every single other week. So
that's true.
Are you gonna go scoop it up in the tournament?
I'm just not going to be happy about it.
I'm not going to scoop it up in the tournament. There's a 0% chance of me scooping it up in the tournaments, but yeah, there's still money to be made. So yeah.
Do you think you have a big edge versus your opponents this week?
Always, every week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Jordan Crawford of DFS, Adam Levitan.
I'll tell you what, weeks like this, I tend to get dusted. I need the obvious plays. Yep. I need everyone else to screw it up. So. All right. The Jaguars and Titans. We're doing a great job on this podcast. Really, we're just killing it for DraftKings here.
God,
I'll tell you what.
Damn it. No wonder there's no ad on this week's podcast.
Oh, we're doing a great one right now. All right. Jaguars and Titans. We got a 3-point favorite Titans team with a 41 total. Uncle Lenny. They're talking about feeding him even more, which is pretty unbelievable. The guy's been fed, but they want to give him the ball even more. Nick Foles is back. Shark was a great play last week. I think Derrick Henry's strong. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
Expecting Corey Davis back, expecting Delaney Walker back, and they'll probably run some 2 tight end with him and Jonnu, but I think they hurt each other a reasonable amount, although Jonnu will probably stand to block way more than than Delaney will. Yeah, I mean, I thought Nick Foles came back and the team played awful, but at least he pushed the ball deep to DJ Chark. And really, Nick Foles has a far bigger arm than Gardner Minshew. And I mean, the Titans outside corners, Adoree Jackson and LaShawn Sims have just been getting roasted on a weekly basis. So I'm into DJ Chark. I think Chris Conley is in play at 4,100. And yeah, Derrick Henry is going to be, I don't believe these splits. Like, if I see one more goddamn tweet about Derrick Henry's yards per carry in November versus September, I'm going to puke. Who cares about what month it is? That said, I think that Derrick Henry is definitely in play. I mean, Jacksonville's defense is been getting buried by the run. And obviously Derrick Henry, normally with big guys, you don't think about them breaking 70, 80-yard runs. Derrick Henry is so fast and does it on such a consistent basis, you can build in the upside for 70-yard touchdown runs for Derrick Henry. It happens, 10% or 20% of games or something crazy. I mean, the dude is just crazy good at ripping off long runs. Yeah. So
the guy is a freaking stallion out there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, there's definitely some plays here and maybe the defenses aren't good as the general market believes.
That's how bad a slate this is. That Adam is waxing poetic about how great a play Derrick Henry is on DraftKings when he get with his one target a game. That's how bad this slate is. And I agree that Derrick Henry's in a great spot. Jacksonville's allowing the fourth most rushing yards per game this year with 134. They're allowing a league high 5.28 yards per carry this year. And regardless of what you think about the yards per carry stat, that's a lot. That's, over five, giving over 5 a rip to opposing running backs, especially, as Pete said, a big horse like Derrick Henry. It's absurd. And that they're going to feed him. Jacksonville's allowing a touchdown on 4.3% of the carries against them this year, which is the 5th highest in the league. I never want to play 2 running backs from the same game, but I kind of want to play 2 running backs from this game in the hopes that...
And the 41 total.
Yeah, right? How bad is this slate? The fact that, I'm hoping that Derrick Henry does his thing and Jacksonville gets up at least a little bit so that they continue to feed him the ball, because Leonard Fournette is a little bit game flow independent. That he's going to get his 5 or 7 targets pretty much every single week. So as long as he gets 15 to 20 carries on the ground, Derrick Henry gets his 25 touches, and you get 6 or 7 targets out of Leonard Fournette, I think you kind of can play both of the guys in tournaments. I'm probably not going to do it in cash games at all. But again, that's how ugly this week is, that I'm considering 2 running backs in the same game with a 41 total. Pete, can you talk me off of this, please?
No, I need both those guys in a big way. So, I just got some really good news.
What was it?
Closing line. I was on a college football game, and the line just moved heavily in my favor.
Congrats!
Good news.
Congrats on the sex.
And hopefully congrats to Leonard Fournette, Uncle Lenny, and Derrick Henry for just going nuts this game, because I like the spot quite a bit. I think it's a strong running back situation for both guys. It's a low total, like you said, but we have no questions about the volume, and it's just a thin slate overall. So I think they're both strong plays, Al. What do we think about DJ Chark, going back to him, coming off a really, really big game? The connection with Foles was incredible. A ton of targets. Obviously, he's more expensive, but I do think he's interesting. And I'll be curious to see how this Titans team plays coming off the bye. I've always been a fan of Corey Davis. We saw some really big upside out of him last year, but I don't know. It's still Tannehill, but this Jaguars defense is probably the most, I won't even say they're overrated, because I don't think anyone's giving them a lot of credit, but they're legitimately really, really bad now. They're dealing with so many injuries. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey traded. So I think the Titans can actually play well in this spot. So Derrick Henry, I love the Titans deep potentially with him. And then the passing game, I'm a little excited about Corey Davis, but that's probably pretty thin. Talk me off any of that.
Yeah, I mean, God, Corey Davis has been in a lot of great spots and not produced all year, and now he's coming off injury. I don't know. That one would scare me, but yeah, I agree with you on DJ Chark is for sure in a really good matchup, and has the right quarterback for his skill set, I think.
What's Oliver's price? Is he in play this week?
Josh Oliver?
Yeah.
He got hurt. He's out. And so is their other tight end. They're down to like Seth DeVal was out too. Yeah, he's hurt too. They're down to like Ben Koyak or something like that.
Oh, there you go. All right, let's move to the last game, which should be an awesome real-life game, but as Al referenced, we're looking at some weather. We have the Cowboys at the Patriots, the best passing offense, and the Cowboys now going into New England to face the best pass defense. So we'll see how that transpires. The weather should help New England. Still 46 total. New England favored by 6.5 points. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, Mohamed Sanu, who I played last week, regretfully, turned out the ankle injury he suffered during that game is pretty bad. It sounds like he's going to miss a couple weeks. Philip Dorsett suffered a concussion in that game. I thought Philip Dorsett was a pretty good play last week. Sounds like he's going to be back, though, which surprised me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it seems like right now their 3 wide receiver set is going to be Julian Edelman, Philip Dorsett, and N'Keal Harry. If Dorsett can't go, anybody who played preseason remembers Jacoby Myers, who was just like, I mean, God, he was so awesome in the preseason. It was ridiculous. So definitely something worth watching. And then also Amari Cooper was limited last week. I mean, pretty badly. He only played like 55% of the snaps. This week he's practicing in full. I expect him to be shadowed by Stephon Gilmore, but obviously Amari can win in any matchup, but certainly softer matchups for Gallup and Cobb. But yeah, as you mentioned, I think a better real life game than fantasy game, undoubtedly.
I mean, maybe Ben Watson at 3,100 if we're looking for a little bit of value at tight end, especially with all the injuries to the, every single wide receiver on New England is questionable. I don't know. I don't know where to go with this game, to be honest with you, because we know that New England has this great defense that's performed really well. We know that they're entering a stretch where they're playing much tougher teams now than they did at the beginning of the season. The first 6, 7, 8 opponents that they had were really soft, and now they've faced they face a much tougher list of teams, from Baltimore in week 9 to Philly in week 11 to Dallas in week 12. But they still rattled off 5 sacks against Carson Wentz last week. So the defense now priced down to 3,300. Are you willing to take a swing on this Patriots defense in Foxborough with weather, Pete?
Yeah, I could be interested in it. Just the troubling part is I have a lot of respect for how Dak's playing, and the strength of this Cowboys team is still the offensive line. So that gives me some concerns. But yeah, we'll monitor the weather. Zeke Elliott's cheap. I haven't really played him that much this year. And I do think that's the better way to try to attack the Patriots. Like if Dallas, if I'm Dallas, this is a week where I actually would try to establish the run more and set up some of the play action and whatnot. Because if you're forced to just throw a ton versus this Patriots team, we've seen how well they've played all year. So I think Zeke is interesting. I wish Tony Pollard was more involved. The guy is a baller. But yeah, on the Patriots side, I mean, it's really hard to just play Patriots in general. And Tom Brady's been vocal and transparent with the media that he's not happy with the offense, and rightfully so. They've really been carried by this defense, and it's just tough. I mean, Burkhead's working in now, so it's a much better real life game, and it's hard to know where to go in fantasy. Although I will say, Michael Gallup, I think he's averaging more fantasy points per game in half-point PPR than DeAndre Hopkins. Guy is a baller.
He's killing it.
Former CSU guy, got to give him a shout out. Big play potential, and Gilmore is on Amari, which Adam referenced, which I'm expecting as well. That should help Gallup. And Randall Cobb's actually been really good for this team too. I know I didn't have nice things to say about him on the podcast last week, but Randall Cobb is playing better, and you just have to respect this Dallas offense. It's a really good team, but the weather could put a damper on all that. So tough spot. I want to have, the ability to maneuver on these slates and leverage late swap versus my opponents, but 2 games and outside, I guess, the 4 or 5 game where you have those running backs, it's really hard to find too many plays to be excited about. So anything else here?
I want a conviction pick from both of you guys. I'm going to give you the head-to-head, and I want you to tell me which player you like better, because they're at a similar price and a very similar usage for both of their teams. James White versus Kareem Hunt. Go.
Adam? Kareem Hunt.
James White or Kareem Hunt?
Very similar players, very similar prices, very similar role. One of them's getting a lot more buzz than the other.
Yeah, I think the more wide receiver injuries there are, the better it is for James White. But I think Kareem Hunt's recent usage is too much to ignore. I'll say Kareem Hunt also.
Okay, I think it's much closer than people think, and I think that James White's a much better tournament play. because his ownership is going to be 1/5 or 1/8 of what Kareem Hunt's is going to be at a very similar price.
We haven't had that vintage James White game, which we seem to have every single year.
He's been extremely consistent this year too.
Yeah, I agree.
But he hasn't had that big 2-touchdown game. You're right.
Yeah, that is a sharp call. And you save $300 on him. I think I'm more excited about Kareem Hunt. In general, we're all a little down about the slate. The good news is we have Thanksgiving coming up. We have one of the best weeks of football, and like Adam said, you can still find edge versus your opponents, and maybe some news breaks that makes the slate a little bit more appetizing. Adam, any final thoughts before we kick it down to get us out of here?
No, stop being so soft. Find some plays, put them out there, get the money.
Easy enough, just like that. We're just gonna a la peanut butter sandwiches. Poof! I'm gonna create some value on this slate, and it's gonna be real comfortable. I'm gonna be happy about it by the time lineups lock. Hopefully, we get some that pops up by the time Thursday and Friday practice reports are out. Don't want anybody to be injured. Never root for that, but hopefully, we get a little bit of a cleaner picture by the time Sunday morning rolls around. So for Pete, for Adam, for producer Luke, and for Jerry, I'm Al. If we don't win a GPP, we hope that one of you guys. Bye.
We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.